Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Stir River, playing as the Beastmen against the force of the High Elves. So, as I've mentioned in my previous Beastmen video, I have been trying to move away from the Cygor obsession, trying to move away from the need to use Cygors. And so going in against High Elves, I decided to do a more conventional build just to try to defeat them in essentially just open battle. For my lord, I did go back to the old classic, Morgr the Shadowgave, with the usual complement of Spirit Essence of Chaos and Stave of Ruinous Corruption for those free Chaos spawn, as well as Foe Seeker and Call of Violence, or for that leadership buff, which can be very useful on Beastmen infantry, which tends to have atrocious morale. Even Bestigors can definitely buckle. Alongside that, we do have Brave Shaman of the Wild. You might be wondering why Wild instead of, say, Death or something like that. High Elves do tend to fight in somewhat condensed formations, and more importantly, I wanted to give a shot to the Mantle of Gorok. This is a cool buff. It drops your armor by 30, but provides essentially a mix of the Waw and Occam's Mind Razor to a single unit. Plus 44 melee attack, plus 40% armor piercing, and plus 40% weapon damage is monstrous, and allows a unit to deliver a crazy crushing blow within the space of a few seconds. It's very, very potent, and I definitely want to give it a shot. I also did bring Devolve as well as Traitorkin. Obviously, Devolve is better against multiple combatants. It's basically a super Flock of Doom. And then Traitorkin is really good against single targets. It's a little bit like a Spirit Leech, I guess. And that also provides a mobility debuff and does affect an AoE. For my front line, I did bring a whole bunch of Bestigors. Bestigors are very hard for the High Elves to deal with. They close the gap incredibly quickly because they have 41 speed with their trait active. In case you don't know, the trait for the Beastmen is called Primal Fury and gives them boost to melee attack, charge bonus speed, and immunity psychology while they're above 50%. It's basically an alternative frenzy. So I did bring 6 units of Bestigors here. The Bestigors will be able to gap close very quickly, and they can massacre the vast majority of High Elf infantry in a very, very quick fashion. Especially when their charge bonus is active. With the charge bonus of 35, they slam into something like Swordmasters of Hoeth even, or Spears, or White Lines of Krace, and they will massacre them. Only Phoenix Guard will really give them a good amount of trouble just because they have that charge defense against all, and then they have very high melee defense and melee attack, so they will kind of chew through Bestigors pretty effectively. I did do something a little riskier with some Minotaurs with great weapons in tow. These guys are, of course, anti-large and armor piercing, which might seem good against something like Dragon Princes or Dragons or that sort of stuff. But Minotaurs with great weapons have no shields. They have terrible armor at 35, so they're very susceptible to elf shooting. So I'm going to have to keep them back in reserve until the time is right. Now, I also did something a little sneaky here. I did drop 2 Gore Hordes into my opponent's backline. They are slightly veteraned up. They are very mobile, 43 speed, so they're even faster than the Bestigors. Pitiful armor. And that's why I didn't want to deploy him with the Bestigors, but also they have Vanguard, so I can sneak up on my opponent, hopefully get into his backline, and essentially use him like a pseudo-calf to jump these Lothern Seaguard. For my opponent, he did decide to bring Tyrion for his Lord. Did not bring a caster, which I think is a little surprising. You will usually see... Actually, he did bring a caster, my bad. But he did bring the Lore Master of Hoeth here, who can, of course, anchor the front line. Interestingly enough, he did bring his full roster of abilities. Perhaps not sure what he wanted to bring, not sure what he wanted to try out. Regardless, Lord Master of Hoeth is no pushover in melee, absolutely monstrous melee combatant, and can really lay the smack down a lot of Beastmen troops. He also does have a bonus against infantry of 16, which makes him very powerful in a duel situation. Were he to fight Morgr, for example, it's quite possible he would stomp Morgr and at least bleed him very badly. My opponent's front line, though, is very squishy with 3 units of Spearmen, who obviously will not get any charge defense against Bestigors. The 2 Phoenix Guard anchoring at the flanks is a much tougher proposition, as are the Swordmasters and White Lines of Krace. But it's really not quite enough troops to deal with this mob of Bestigors. So my opponent will definitely be relying on Tyrion with the Sunfang to deliver, to really provide that support, as well as the support from the Lore Master of Hoeth. 3 units of Lothern Seaguard are going to be firing away at my Bestigors. They can do huge amounts of damage to the Minotaurs, so I'll be trying to keep them out of range. And they can do, over time, good amounts of damage to the Bestigors, but I definitely have to be careful. So I definitely have to be careful of them. But once again, they're not going to do great against the Bestigors and kind of a just brawl. And their main perk is really just their self-defense ability. So throwing things into full speed, you can see I'm simply plowing through, not doing anything fancy schmancy. I do get a hit by Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the Bestigor herd, but oh well, it is what it is. Gonna take some arrow fire, might lose some HP on the Bestigors, but that's okay. You can see I am pushing one of the units of Bestigors around the flank, taking advantage of that 41 speed to try to get into my opponent's backline, figuring that I can hold down the fort in the front long enough for this flank to go through. As my opponent has fired a whole bunch of volleys into me at this point, I do decide to push the Minotaurs a little bit closer, getting a little cheekier, and you can see a devolve going down on this blob of Spearmen and Lothern Seaguard and starting to cause some immense damage. With the backing of those nasty Bestigors, they're able to annihilate the spears in a matter of seconds, and you can see they're just falling apart very quickly. My British Shaman of the Wild does try to push through and be a distraction, but immediately gets jumped on by Tyrion, and so I do pull him back, just trying to keep him alive before cycling back into the spears. Over here, the Chaos Spawn have gone down. They will get massacred very quickly by the Lothern Seaguard, but they are buying me some time. And you can see now I'm pushing into the backline with my Gore Herd, having waited for those. And I actually waited on the edges of the woods here until the White Lines of Krace and Swordmasters pushed to the front to fight the Bestigors. Now my opponent, it does push through with Tyrion here. He is on the wrong side of my Bestigors. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast the Mantle of Gorok on these Minotaurs as they're making their charge, and we can watch what happens as they push straight into Tyrion. And you can see Tyrion's HP just tanks. He drops down to 3,000 HP, and he's getting sliced and diced very quickly. You can just see the HP pool dropping. He does have Monstrous melee defense, but it's just not enough against these boosted up Minotaurs, and they are chewing through him. They have a bonus against large, which is boosting their chance to hit. They've got 80 melee attack, and they just dropped Tyrion by about half of his HP in the space of a few seconds. An Earthblood does go down, but as you can see, my opponent's front line is simply buckling. The Minotaurs are into the cookie jar. They're chasing after Tyrion, making him run away, and despite Wiston's wild form, the heal, and all that sort of stuff, they will be able to lay the smackdown on him. Over here, Morgar is in the midst of the fray, trying to just tie Tyrion down, trying to allow the Minotaurs to catch up. And I do charge the Brace Shaman in here just to disrupt things a little more and be a bit more of a nuisance. My opponent is forced to pull his White Lines of Krace off the line here to try to contest this backline slaughter. The Chaos Spawn and the Gore Herd are doing huge amounts of work to the Lothern Seaguard. Gores will slaughter Lothern Seaguard in a melee pretty effectively, especially once again on the charge. The charge bonus is so decisive, and I think it's something people often underestimate the impact of it. Over here, Tyrion, you can see he doesn't have the Heart of Avalorn, so he won't get that crazy burst of healing, and you can see he's getting dragged into the muck pretty effectively. He does, of course, have Sunfang, but simply put, right now he's not really able to make use of it. He's getting slaughtered by those angry Minotaurs, and despite the debuffs to the Minotaurs and the fact that he's able to escape, my opponent's army is definitely buckling. The Bestigors on the flank did collapse on the Phoenix Guard. They got a rear charge, and now the Phoenix Guard is going to collapse and fall apart. Bestigors over here are massacring the remains of these Spearmen. They're going to be able to push into the White Lines of Krace and slaughter them. I did zone away the White Lines with the Chaos Spawn. Chaos Spawn is not great against heavily armored infantry, but they'll do okay. They have monstrous weapon strength regardless, and they do apply poison. Over here, I do get my Gores to surround Tyrion. Not an ideal fight. He does get an Earthblood cast on him to heal him a little bit, but it's really not going to be enough. Even with Faint and Riposte and all those buffs, the Gores can just surround him and keep him in place. And I am pulling my Braid Shaman of the Wild out to attack these Lothern Seaguard. So you can see my opponent's army finally does buckle, simply surrounded and getting massacred from all sides. And it's really rather a fight that ends in a total slaughter. So, the Minotaurs with the buffs coming in, especially the Mantle of Gorok, proved to be absolutely monstrous, and I think it's one of those abilities that, especially on the Minotaurs, it works really well. Minotaurs don't have good armor to begin with. You're not bringing them or trying to take advantage of their armor, so you might as well cast it. It's a huge buff, and honestly, it's even good against Bestigors. For example, I could have used it in the fight between the Phoenix Guard and the Bestigors to get a similar effect, I think, because it would have helped bust through their high melee defense. It's great on the Minotaurs to bring Tyrion low in a matter of seconds. It's just a great buff, and I think it's one of the. I think people often underestimate the value of buffs, and if they do bring buffs, they try to make use of the cheap ones. And this is a very expensive buff, but if you can time it correctly, if you can get good value out of it, you can cause some immense work. And despite Tyrion's monstrous melee stats, the combination of the Minotaurs' great weapon bonus against large, their charge, as well as, of course, the buff from Mantle of Gorok, meant that they were just slamming through Tyrion's HP incredibly quickly and just cutting him down to size. Bestigors are a huge problem for High Elves as well, and that's something I think is worth mentioning. They have huge, as we mentioned before, they're very quick on their feet. They can close the distance super quick. They hit like trucks. They've got good armor. And so they gap close with ridiculous speed, and then they just kind of chop their way through everything the High Elves have. As mentioned, I really think the only unit that gives them huge trouble is really the Phoenix Guard, and of course large units can be a problem. Since they don't have a bonus against large, they don't have great defense. If your opponent can get Dragon Princes into the backline, for example, they will kind of slaughter Bestigors. Definitely cause them issues. But I definitely think it's a bit of a trouble matchup for the High Elves. They're definitely very potent. The Gores, as you can see, also performed rather well. They did go in with a single chevron apiece, but jumping into the backline, getting on top of those Lothern Seaguard after my opponent's armor-piercing troops pushed forward, allowed them to really have a great effect on the outcome of that battle. Never underestimate the power of cheap infantry and just tying down or dealing with sort of backline troops. And with their Vanguard ability, that was really a huge boon, especially on this map. The Stir River doesn't have the most condensed of, or it has pretty condensed and small spawning zones. So there's a lot of Vanguard area, so it's very, very potent. Morgr, I think, is still very competitive as usual. I think he's very good. And the Brayshawn of the Wild had a huge impact with those spells, as well as to an extent his Chariot just running a rough shot over enemy troops. So definitely great game to my opponent, Tatazo here. Obviously it was a very shock and awe, quick victory sort of battle, but I did want to just show how powerful Bestigors can be, and just how powerful you can be without the use of Cygors as when you're playing as Beastmen. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments or criticism of your own, be sure to post it down and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.